The Carpenter and the Cradle, a History Weaver Adventure, Book 1, by Connie Worden, read by the author. Chapter 9. Fern pedaled harder, trying to keep pace with the Eagles twins. She wasn't as naturally athletic, and she always struggled to keep up with them doing anything physical. Of course, they couldn't play violin and piano like she could after the years of lessons she'd started when she was Christopher's age. She had her areas of strength too, but biking wasn't one of them. "Slow down," she gasped out, as her legs groaned and her handlebars wobbled from the steepness of the hill to the Beaver Row Bookshop. "Almost there, Fern. Come on, last push, keep up," July called back cheerily. Fern dropped her bike and half rolled off when at last they reached the Eagles' front lawn. "Okay now," she said, still panting. "Can you please tell me what on earth the big emergency was that you had to tell me about?" "Well, Fern, it's like this," July said, and proceeded to explain the situation with Georgie. Fern's mouth gaped wider and wider as she heard all that Georgie had told June and July. "So, we were wondering, what do you think about Georgie? Her real name is Victoria, by the way, but she says we can keep on calling her Georgie, seeing that's how we've thought of her for months. Anyway, what would you think about Georgie camping out temporarily in that old empty storage shed your family has on the back of their vacant rental property? It's not locked, right? And being vacant property, hopefully she could come and go without being seen. She wouldn't wreck things, obviously." "Well," Fern said uncertainly. She hated to let down her friends. But what if things went wrong? What if Georgie was discovered? Fern would be in so much trouble. She always tried to fly under the radar with her mum and get as little attention as possible. Her mum found fault for any little thing anyway. What if she had a real reason, a major reason? Like Fern allowing a runaway to squat in their old storage shed on a property that Tim and Joanna were hoping to find a renter for. What if the vagabond in the shed was discovered and kept the property from being rented? Fern's imagination ran away to the tongue-lashing she already knew she'd receive if such a thing ever happened. Fireworks, waterworks, the works, her mum would turn it on. "How could you do such a thing? You ruined the chances of making an income on this property, and you know how tight things are. How could you be so selfish? How could you be so thoughtless? What could you possibly have been thinking? You've betrayed your family. And for what? For a runaway girl who should have been returned to the proper authorities. She belongs at home with her people. What you've done is illegal, and you've hurt your family with your foolish actions." Ah, yes, Fern could hear it already. She'd heard the likes of it many times before, and on much slighter pretexts. And besides her own discomfort in having to endure the lecture, apologizing a million times wouldn't even slow her mother down once she'd built up a head of steam. How would her decision affect Christopher and Tim? Would her mother take it out on them somehow? Would she blame Tim? Would this help to deteriorate their shaky marriage further? All this ran through Fern's mind in the space of microseconds. In the background of the dialogue playing out in her mind, she could hear June's coaxing. "We wouldn't ask it if it wasn't really important, Fern. Her stepfather's tried to kill her 3 times. She can't go into a foster home, because they'll definitely send her back to live with her stepfather, and no one will believe her that he's trying to kill her. She just needs a little time to figure out why, and then maybe things can change, like she can actually go to the police with what she knows. Or I think that's what she meant. But she needs to buy some time somehow anyways, and I don't think anyone would find her in that storage shed." She wore Fern down. Fern, as she often did, made the decision to give in to the person right in front of her putting on the pressure. She'd deal with the pressure of a greater threat later, because it wasn't as immediate. "Well, I guess maybe she could," Fern said, biting the fingernail on her index finger down to the quick. Her stomach churned as she said it. No backing out now. Coe quickly took stock. He knew the general area where he'd landed, and he could certainly find his way home from here, but not at night. And without a light, that wouldn't be the best idea. How late was it? The adrenaline pumping through his body that had kept him awake until he had managed his escape had deserted him, draining him of all his energy reserves. Did he dare try catch a short sleep and make his way home by daylight? He'd be easier to spot then if the men came back for him. But would they? Surely they'd assume he'd been drowned, and would leave his body for his own people to find, no longer having any use for him as a dead body. And, if they were out combing the riverbank for him now, waiting till morning was a better idea. He felt like he could barely lift his feet to stumble over the rocks, looking for any kind of sheltered spot. Yes, he definitely wasn't making it home tonight. It was still rather exposed, but Co didn't feel as though he could go any farther when he slumped down in the tall grass growing in a meadow just behind a stand of the giant trees that grew by the riverside. The grass would give him some shelter from searching eyes, and it was much softer than the rocks along the riverbank. He found a grassy spot under a cottonwood and sank into it. Although midsummer, the nights were always cooler, and Co's clothing was wet. He stripped it off and lay in the grass, feeling its prickle against his skin. But neither the cold nor the grass could bother him for long, exhausted as he was. He closed his eyes and let the rustling in the cottonwoods lull him to sleep.